How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Bill?
I'm terrific, thank you. Let me give you a brief bio here. Devin Spear was born and raised in New York. He lived in Israel for 10 years, has a degree in Jewish history from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and served in the Israeli Defense Forces. Mr. Spear has spoken to numerous live radio and television audiences in defense of Israel. He currently divides his time between Scottsdale, Arizona, and Netanya, Israel. Devin Spear is the author of a blog on the Times of Israel and of the book, The Future of Israel. We're going to give copies of The Future of Israel away to people who call today. Winner of the 2005 GLIP Award. You can view all his articles, interviews, and debates at www.devinsper.com. And remember, if you ever miss any information here, just send me an email, radioforum@aol.com, and I can get the information to you. Okay, without any further ado, let me get to some questions for you. Devin, Israel is in the midst of a wave of Palestinian terror attacks on a scale we have not seen for some time. I would like to discuss why these attacks are different from previous attacks, what is behind them, and Israel's strategy for defeating them. First, however, please describe for our audience the attacks themselves so they can understand what's going on.
All right. Well, the first attack occurred in Beersheba in the Negev on March 22nd. Mohammed Abu El-Kayan, who's an Israeli Bedouin, drove to a gas station where he stabbed and killed a female employee. He then drove his car over to a shopping center where he ran over and killed a Chabad rabbi on his bicycle. Next, he went into a clothing store where he stabbed a 47-year-old woman to death. Then he ran outside and stabbed and killed a 67-year-old man. Kayan was then approached by a bus driver who happened to be armed. He told Kayan to drop his knife. The terrorist refused. He lunged forward and tried to stab the driver, who shot him dead. 5 days later in Hadera on March 27th, two more Israeli Arab citizens, and I want to point out that all three of these first terrorists we're discussing were Israeli Arab citizens, not Palestinians. Ayman and Ibrahim Igibara fired at a bus stop in Hadera, killing two police officers, one of whom was an Israeli Druze, and injuring 12 other people. Now, prior to the attack, they had posted a video in front of an ISIS flag, and in 2016, Ibrahim was caught by Turkish authorities attempting to join ISIS in Syria, and he served 18 months in an Israeli jail. 2 days later in Bnei Brak, which is a religious suburb of Tel Aviv, a Palestinian from the Jenin area named Daya Hamaresh infiltrated into Israel through an agricultural crossing meant for Palestinian farmers to access fields on the other side of the border fence. He began by firing at apartment balconies. He then killed two Ukrainian construction workers who happened to be outside a grocery store and a driver who happened to pass by. And Hamaresh tried to shoot another resident, but luckily his gun jammed. He then went to another street where he saw 29-year-old Rabbi Yehezkel, who was taking his 2-year-old baby in a stroller for a walk. Hamaresh opened fire at Yehezkel, killing him. Hamaresh engaged in a gun battle with two police officers who were called in to confront him on a motorcycle, ending in the terrorist's death. But one of the officers, who was a Christian Arab named Amir Khoury, was also killed. A large number of ultra-Orthodox from the Bnei Brak area went to the Christian village where Khoury is from and attended his funeral. On April 7th in Tel Aviv at night, a terrorist named Rad Hazim from Jenin, also from Jenin, went to Dizengoff Street, which is a big nightlife area of Tel Aviv, and opened fire at 3 different locations. He shot 22 people, 3 of whom later died of their wounds. One of them was Barak Luftan, an Olympic kayaker. The terrorist fled on foot, and he remained at large for several hours after the shooting, resulting in an extensive manhunt by 1,000 soldiers and police. Early the next morning, he was found hiding in a mosque in Yaffo and killed in a gunfight. He has no clear ties to any militant organizations. However, his father was a security officer for the Palestinian Authority and had spent time in an Israeli prison. And Hazim's family praised him as a hero and then disappeared from their home and are being sought by the Israeli police for possible involvement. 3 days later, April 10th, a Palestinian woman was shot dead by officers after trying to stab them at a checkpoint near the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron. and one of the border policemen was lightly hurt. In Ashkelon on April 12th, a Palestinian from Hebron area was shot and killed after stabbing an Israeli officer. The officer here, too, was lightly wounded. And finally, in Haifa on April 15th, a man was stabbed and lightly wounded by a 15-year-old Arab girl who was arrested. And her father had called in prior and said that she was on her way and intended to carry out an attack, although he didn't know where. And then you have the issue of the Temple Mount. On Friday, this Friday, 470 Arabs were arrested after throwing rocks down at the Western Wall, which sits below the mount. And when the police came up to stop them, they had prepared rocks and were throwing them at the police. But all 470 were arrested, and the Ramadan prayers resumed afterwards with no incidents.
Okay, this is kind of dovetail with what I've said for many years about Israel suffering a death of 1,000 cuts, but that's for another show, and I will amplify that some other time. Thank you for that background. Devin, tell us, is there a common denominator among the current wave of Palestinian terrorists?
There is, and we'll explain it, but on the surface, I want to point out there doesn't appear to be one. So some of these are Palestinians from Judea and Samaria, and some of them are Israeli Arab citizens, which is very unusual. Some had a criminal background, and some had ISIS affiliation. None of them were associated with the standard Palestinian terrorist organizations, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Al-Aqsa's Martyrs Brigade, and so on. Nor do they have any connection with each other. On the surface, these all appear to be lone wolves acting on the spur of the moment against targets of opportunity without planning, which of course makes it very difficult to anticipate what they're going to do and to prevent it.
Okay, then why the sudden increase in Palestinian terrorism after a long period of relative quiet?
The one common denominator that there is between all these terrorists is all were incited by calls to violence against Israelis on the internet. All of the above-mentioned Palestinian groups, as well as the Palestinian Authority himself, have been flooding the internet with vicious incitement against Israel and calls for violence against Israelis. The terrorists in the first two attacks were inspired by ISIS, which is doing likewise.
Okay, I'll tell you something. It's very frustrating for me being here in Arizona to read about all this and to hear you talk about it and amplify some of which I already had heard. I just feel very frustrated about it, but I think it's very good that you're here to explain it to the listening audience. Devin, tell us, what is causing these groups to suddenly increase their anti-Israel incitement online?
I think now we get to the crux of the matter, and this is my opinion, that these terrorist organizations have become frantic as they see themselves losing traction and becoming irrelevant in Israel, in the Middle East, and the world at large. Their 75-year campaign of terror has not only failed to destroy Israel, but Israel's a great success story, and it grows ever stronger and more prosperous. Most significantly, from their point of view, Israel is becoming increasingly accepted by the Arab world and even Israeli Arabs. So it's not a coincidence that the first attack in Beersheba came on the same day that Israel, Egypt, and UAE were holding a summit in Egypt, or that the second attack in Hadera happened on the same day as a second summit was being held in Israel with representatives of Egypt, Bahrain, Morocco, and the United Arab Emirates. Now, this kind of public summit between the leaders of Israel and Arab countries is unprecedented. And what it shows is the complete acceptance. It's like a dam has broken, and the Arab world, by and large, has decided to accept Israel. And this is what so worries the Palestinian terrorists. Israel now has normal relations with all these countries, as well as Jordan, Sudan, and Bahrain. She even has defense and intelligence cooperation with all these Arab countries, and even just signed a military agreement with Morocco. Turkey and Qatar, which were until recently hostile to Israel, are also now seeking closer relations with us. Even those Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, who don't yet have open relations with Israel, quietly trade and cooperate with her on intelligence against their common enemies, Iran and her Shiite terrorist proxies, and the Sunni terrorists like Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
Devin, do you think that the fact that Iran is just, in a summary, it's just a horrible place, it's a horrible country in relation to anybody else. Do you think their hostility to Iran is what's causing them to side with Israel, knowing that Israel's on the other side of the Iran equation?
Yes, that's part of it. What you have to understand is the other part is they see the United States having withdrawn from the area, particularly in Afghanistan, the way we withdrew. They feel there is no one to protect them. And so they're turning to each other and to Israel, and they're getting together and saying we need to work with each other. And they're talking about common air defense and so on. But there's another side to it.
Okay, Devin, talk about the other side after the break. We are coming on the first hard break. Listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on 960 The Patriot. My name is William Wolf. I'm your host today. Next Sunday, Mayor Jalbitz returns to the microphone. He does a great job. I know you'll be very happy to hear him also next Sunday. And I thank you for helping me bring the show to you. The best way, as I've said many, many times, is to use the services of my advertisers. That's the lifeblood of Middle East Radio Forum. This is a brokered show, which means I have to pay for the time each and every Sunday. We're in the 19th year. I have to renew my contract, and I'd like to continue doing it, but there is a reality of the finances. So please use the services of the advertisers, and it's very important. You need to let them know each time that you're using their services because they advertise on this program. They need to know that their advertising dollars are being well spent here on Middle East Radio Forum. Direct donations are certainly welcome. You can send a check to me, William J. Wolf, at my office, 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203, Phoenix 85020. The address again, 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203, Phoenix 85020. I appreciate direct donations, but as I've said, the best way to support the show is by using the advertisers. They're with me each and every week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for staying with us. We'll be right back with Devin Spear after the break. Dassault and Macros are my business and personal CPAs for a good reason. Prompt and accurate work means I trust them with all my accounting needs. Conveniently located just off the 51 freeway at 3519 East Shea Boulevard, Suite 122, give them a call and see what they can do for you. 602-996-8885. That's Dassault and Macros, 602-996-8885. There are a lot of great Mexican restaurants in Phoenix, but I am very particular. When I want the best Mexican lunch or dinner, I head straight to Mi Patio on the southeast corner of 7th Avenue and Osborne. They serve all your favorite dishes and only use pure vegetable oil in their cooking. Mi Patio is sure to become your favorite Mexican restaurant too. That's Mi Patio Mexican Restaurant on the southeast corner of 7th Avenue and Osborne. Tell them that William Wolf sent you there. Watermark Wealth Strategies and Watermark Wealth Planning offices at 11333 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 295 in Scottsdale. Has been a loyal sponsor of this program since its start. They specialize in wealth retention, estate, and legacy planning. Watermark has been a leader in the Valley, and its members have been together for over 17 years. Founding partner Carmen Cercone has over 36 years of experience in tax, investment, and estate planning issues affecting retirees and their assets. They offer comprehensive planning that has helped assist families through the process of identifying client objectives and concerns and constructing a strategic plan to address tax, risk, and legacy issues. Consultations are complimentary, and we encourage you to contact Allison Porter at 480-442-3989 to schedule. Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, an affiliate of Kestra Investment Services. Watermark Wealth Strategies, LLC is not affiliated with Kestra Investment Services or Kestra Advisory Services. How do you choose your accident injury attorney? If you need heart surgery, do you choose your surgeon from seeing an ad on TV or a billboard? Of course not. Choosing your attorney also should not be done so casually and without thought. I do not advertise on TV or billboards, but only on this radio show. I give all clients personal attention. Your phone calls are never intercepted by some untrained assistant. I take all calls if I am available or return calls at my earliest opportunity. I was named Trial Attorney of the Year by the Arizona Trial Lawyers Association 2 years ago and have 48 years of experience. So think about it and choose your accident attorney wisely. My number is 602-279-1914, and my office is located at 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203 in Phoenix. I personally welcome your call. Again, 602-279-1914.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on 960 The Patriot. To join in the conversation, call anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free 888-960-9696. Questions are also welcome at radioforum@aol.com. That's radioforum@aol.com. Now back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to today's edition of Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. My guest is Devin Spear. Please hold your questions to the bottom of the hour because we've got some material we want to get through without being interrupted. Devin, before the break, we were talking about Israel and its relations with other Arab countries. In my opinion, these Arab countries are finally starting to realize the benefit of good relations with Israel, technological, agricultural, and so on. You want to expand on that?
Yes, that's exactly right. So before the break, I mentioned that they're worried about Iran. And Iran is one of the prime motivators for Israel. But from the Arab point of view, that's a secondary benefit. The real benefit for them is economic. And the countries that that want to move into the modern world, that don't want to be held back anymore by the radicals, that are not going to allow the Palestinians to drag them again into a war for which there's no benefit to them, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, all these countries, they want to get on and become part of the modern world and economy. And Israel has a lot to offer them. Israel is offering them defense technology, which they can't get elsewhere and with no political strings attached. They share intelligence on Iran, but there's tourism. Tens and tens of thousands of Israelis have been going to UAE, to Dubai since it opened up. And the other countries are actually vying for that business. I watch Israeli satellite TV and I see advertisements by Morocco asking Jews to come now to Morocco, to Egypt. They just did a big promotion that Jews should come to Sinai, and they are trying to benefit from the prosperity of Israel, which is now a $400 billion economy, from the technology of Israel. They have many of the same problems of water resources, of living in the desert, the same enemies, and they realize they have more in common with Israel, and they want to get on with their lives and not be held back anymore by the Palestinian radicals.
Okay, you've kind of touched on it already, but I'll ask the question directly. Why are the Palestinian terror organizations inciting Arabs in Israel to violence but not themselves attacking Israel with rockets or otherwise as they have in the past?
Right, that's another thing that's different here. You see Gaza, you see Hamas and these other organizations asking Israeli Arabs or Palestinian Arabs to attack Israelis, but they are sitting very quietly. They haven't launched any rockets. There's not a peep coming out of them publicly. And the reason is that they received devastating blows back in May in Operation Guardian of the Walls. And they're actually in no position to fight another war with Israel right now. And they therefore prefer to incite the Israeli Arabs and Arabs in Judea and Samaria to violence while keeping quiet themselves so Israel can't retaliate. Their tunnels under the border were all destroyed. Iron Dome has neutralized their ability to hit Israel with rockets. And of course, you may have some loose cannon who ends up firing a missile and starting another war. But right now, Hamas is extremely anxious to avoid renewed destruction of their military infrastructure.
Okay. What has been the response of the Arab world to these attacks? You described them in detail to start the show.
Yes.
What about the response of the Arab world, if you can even label the Arab world as one entity?
Right, that's true. It's not really one entity, and there is very different opinions on Israel now in the Arab world, and it's not a monolith. But those countries that I mentioned that have good relations with Israel have actually condemned these attacks. Now, the Temple Mount, which we'll get into, is another story. It's a religious issue. But as far as these terrorist attacks, they've pretty much all condemned it, the exception being, of course, Iran and her proxies, Hezbollah and her other terrorist proxies.
All right, just to be clear, though, Iran is not an Arab country. It's Persian.
But even Turkey...
It's Muslim, but it's not Arab.
Right. But even Turkey, which is also a Muslim and not Arab country, has condemned the attacks.
Okay. All righty. Let's see here. What have been the response of Israeli Arabs to this terror, since a lot of the apparently terrorists are Israeli Arabs? Do most of them support the terrorists, or do you have any idea as to that?
I do, and that's a very interesting question. So Israeli Arab Knesset member Ayman Odeh called on all Israeli Arabs to quit the army and the police force. But the thing is this, the majority of Israeli Arabs, according to polls, don't agree with him. They've concluded that Israel is here to stay, that in fact they're better off in Israel. You know, they only need look at across the border at the failed state in Lebanon, which is run by Iran, or Syria, and they can see that they're better off. And they want to fully participate in Israeli prosperity and national life. I just read a recent survey. 98% of the Arab Israeli citizens oppose acts of violence against the Jews today, and 93% think that the perpetrators do not represent Arab society. Two of the victims were Israeli Arab police officers, right? So these are Israeli Arabs serving in the police who gave their lives to stop the terrorists, and they are being celebrated as heroes among the Israeli Arabs. There was a previous Israeli Arab terrorist who fled the scene, and he was turned in by his own town. Sheikh Mohammed Abu El-Kayan, who is the uncle of the Beersheba terrorist by the same name, told Israeli Channel 12, I quote, "The whole tribe condemns this attack. We do not support it at all. We also despise ISIS. This deed and this guy, even though he was my nephew, do not represent us." Mansour Abbas, who is a minister in the Israeli government, who represents a third of the Israeli Arabs, he tries to work within the system and better the lives of the Israeli Arabs. And he said the other day, quote, "The whole of Arab society has come out against the latest wave of terrorist attacks." And this is new. It is inconceivable for someone to come and decide that he's taking the lives of innocent people. There is a citizenship contract between us, living together, and such acts of violence violate the contract. Now, the one place where the terrorists are getting traction is on the Temple Mount. But even there, they haven't succeeded so far. What is happening is it's Ramadan, which is a holy month, and they get 50,000 people each Friday during Ramadan to come up to the mosque. And so they use that as an attempt to stir up some trouble and get these 50,000 people to riot. Now, the truth is the 50,000 people are there to pray, and they're not there to riot, but they always send in agitators to cause a problem. So what they did this time is they sent people with rocks, and they were throwing rocks down at the Western Wall, which lies below the Temple Mount. The police, of course, have to go up there to stop it. Then they start attacking and throwing rocks at the police. And then they broadcast that the Israeli police are invading the holy Islamic site. But what happened is interesting. The Israeli police went in. They arrested all 470 of the people throwing rocks. And the 50,000 others resumed their peaceful prayers. In other words, they were very happy that the Israelis came and cleaned up the mess and were happy to go about their business. And so for 2 Fridays in a row now, they've absolutely failed to stir up a riot. And we have 2 more Fridays in Ramadan. You never know. They're volatile. They could succeed. And if they succeed, it'll be only on this issue of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But so far, even there, they've failed.
Okay, Devin, we are coming up on the second break of today's show, and if you're interested, I would like to explore why the Temple Mount is even controlled by the Arabs, given the fact that it was captured by Israel in 1967 after being desecrated for decades by Arabs. But that's something else we can talk about. Right now we have to go to break. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on 960 The Patriot. My name is William Wolf. Thank you for listening. The show is available everywhere in the world on the internet, on my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.com. Also, the show is rebroadcast on the station every Saturday at 9 p.m. But, of course, you can always listen to the podcast 24/7. Just go to the website, click on the podcast. You can listen to probably 300 or 400 old shows anytime you like. As I mentioned before, last few weeks, I have to renew my contract for another year. It's coming up. And I need to know that I have listeners who are interested. I do thank the people who have sent me a check. It's very important. Even if it's $5, it tells me that you're interested enough to write a check out, stick it in an envelope, and mail it to me to help me pay for the show. You can send a check to me, William J. Wolf, at my office, 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203, Phoenix 85020. I like to think it's worth at least $1 a week if you're listening to the show, $1 for an hour of Middle East Radio Forum. So if you are listening, please send me at least $52. That shows me you're interested and want the show to continue. Please stay with us. We're right back with the next section of today's show with my very special guest, Devin Spear. Friends of the Israel Defense Forces offers educational, cultural, recreational, and social services that provide hope, purpose, and life-changing support for the soldiers who protect Israel. FIDF is the sole organization authorized to collect donations on behalf of the soldiers of the IDF. For more information or to make a donation, please visit fidf.org or call 323-843-2690. Watermark Wealth Strategies and Watermark Wealth Planning offices at 11333 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 295 in Scottsdale. Has been a loyal sponsor of this program since its start. They specialize in wealth retention, estate, and legacy planning. Watermark has been a leader in the Valley, and its members have been together for over 17 years. Founding partner Carmen Cercone has over 36 years of experience in tax, investment, and estate planning issues affecting retirees and their assets. They offer comprehensive planning that has helped assist families through the process of identifying client objectives and concerns and constructing a strategic plan to address tax, risk, and legacy issues. Consultations are complimentary, and we encourage you to contact Allison Porter at 480-442-3989 to schedule. Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, an affiliate of Kestra Investment Services. Watermark Wealth Strategies, LLC is not affiliated with Kestra Investment Services or Kestra Advisory Services. Maryland Deli and Mini Mart on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland is much more than just a great Shell station and Mini Mart. Great cook-to-order food, different flavors of coffee and tea, beer and fine wine, including kosher wine, round out a wonderful one-stop shopping experience. A loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum, check them out on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland and Phoenix. That's Maryland Deli and Mini Mart, 602-277-6269.
Are you vegetarian or vegan? Boy, do we have the restaurant for you. Veggie Village at 1255 East Northern in Phoenix, a terrific restaurant. Chicken, shrimp, calamari, mutton, and fish, all made from plants, a delight to your taste buds. This is a really exceptional restaurant. Closed on Sunday, but otherwise 6 days of terrific dishes. That's Veggie Village, 1255 East Northern, or call them at 602-944-1088.
This is William Wolf. My weekday job is a personal injury attorney in practice since 1971. I have been named Trial Attorney of the Year by the Arizona Trial Lawyers Association. My office is at 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203 in Phoenix. There is no charge for our first meeting, and I take all cases on a contingent fee basis. Call me at 602-279-1914. That's 602-279-1914. I look forward to meeting you.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on 960 The Patriot. To join in the conversation, call anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free 888-960-9696. Questions are also welcome at radioforum@aol.com. That's radioforum@aol.com. Now back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to today's edition of Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. I'm the host today. Devin Spear is my guest. And Devin, I've got a question from Israel. Can we take that before we continue?
Let's do it.
All right, let's see. Rachel from Hadera, Israel writes, I live in Israel, and before I lived here, I visited many times over many years. In earlier years, I traveled all over the country, including places like the Sinai, East Jerusalem, and Ramallah. Today, due to Arab violence and the threat of more violence, these and many other parts of the country are off limits to Jews. In practical terms, this country is shrinking every year as far as Jews are concerned. What is in Israel's power to do to prevent the country from becoming a greater metropolitan ghetto? And Devin, I'd like to add that I've been to Israel fairly recently, and they've got some signs leading to some of the towns in Judea and Samaria that warn Jews not to go in because they may be killed. Big red letter signs. Mm-hmm. So go ahead and please answer the question.
Well, first of all, Rachel, I agree with you. That is the situation. It's gotten worse. And the underlying reason for that is that they gave Yasser Arafat control over Judea and Samaria. and ultimately Gaza was controlled by Hamas. And when you hand over territory to a terrorist organization, that is what you can expect. And so that and the whole Oslo Agreement was a massive mistake. But that being the case, the question is, what can you do now? First of all, I want to give some background. There is a tremendous wave of inter-Arab violence in Israel and in Judea and Samaria. 51 Israeli Arabs have been killed so far this year by other Arabs on just sort of family feuds, gangland feuds, and the Israelis have largely ignored this issue. They can't ignore it anymore because the violence is now spilling over to Israel. And so now they're finally doing something about it. The first thing they're doing is they're making efforts to stop the large amount of guns from flooding in and to collect the guns that are out there, although that's going to take years. Also, this government is responding to this wave of terror in a different way than all previous governments have responded. There are two important differences. First of all, the Prime Minister Bennett told the army again today that there are no restrictions on them. In other words, the politicians are not going to interfere in how the army defeats the wave of terror. They're leaving it to the Chief of Staff to do whatever he has to do by any means necessary. Secondly, the Chief of Staff Kochavi, who is, by the way, a real soldier, a very innovative thinker, not a politician, he is aggressively taking the fight to the terrorists by attacking them where they live rather than waiting for them to attack Israelis. So here's what's happening. First of all, you have Israeli Military Signal Intelligence Unit 8200 is scanning social media networks and the internet to locate anyone planning attacks. And they have passed this information over to the army, and suspects are being arrested all over the place and in some cases killed in shootouts. There was a case recently in Jenin where a whole carload of heavily armed terrorists was on its way to an attack in Israel. They were stopped, and 3 terrorists were killed after a gun battle. And the other cars, like one yesterday in Ramallah, was stopped, and the terrorists were arrested. Now, Jenin has been a particular hotspot. Jenin is an Arab town in the north of the Samaria, right up to next to the Galilee. And basically, the Palestinian Authority has completely lost control of Jenin. And it's run today by a coalition of terror groups. And the number of these recent terrorists that we just mentioned earlier have come from that area. So what the IDF did is they've cut off Jenin, they've surrounded it, and they're raiding it day and night to prevent terrorist attacks. So far, 16 terrorists have been killed and hundreds have been arrested. This is before they came to Israel. Thirdly, the security barrier between Israel, Judea, and Samaria has been allowed to deteriorate by the previous government, and the fence is full of holes through which Palestinians come to work each morning. The cabinet approved 360 million shekels to rebuild it, and Kochavi sent 2 battalions of infantry and army engineers to immediately guard the gaps and repair them. He's dropped leaflets warning the Palestinians not to approach the barrier, and the army has been ordered to shoot anybody attempting to cross it. This is also different. Now,
1 minute.
Look, Israel will eventually defeat this wave of terror, as she's defeated all previous waves of terror. And in the long run, the Palestinian Arabs, like the Israeli Arabs who have decided they want to live in peace with Israel, most of them, the Palestinian Arabs will either make that same decision or they'll continue to bang their head against a wall and see their society continue to decay and spin out of control in violence. And they're going to continue to be viewed as a hopeless pariah by the entire world, including the Arab countries.
Okay, I've got to interrupt you there, Devin. You can pick up on that when we get back. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on 960 The Patriot. My name is William Wolf. We're in the third break of today's show. We have the longest segment coming up, so please stay with us. Get your calls in now if you'd like to call in. And again, I have to ask always to please use the services of the advertisers and let them know you're doing so because they advertise on this program. That's the lifeblood of this show. As you know, this is the longest running brokerage show in the history of the state of Arizona. I don't know about elsewhere, but it might be the longest in the country. I don't know. But in any event, longest in Arizona. And I'd like to thank you for helping me do that by using the services of the advertisers. Very important because they're with me each and every Sunday. That's how I pay for the show. Please stay with us. We'll be right back with Devin Spear.
Are you vegetarian or vegan? Boy, do we have the restaurant for you. Veggie Village at 1255 East Northern in Phoenix, a terrific restaurant. Chicken, shrimp, calamari, mutton, and fish, all made from plants, a delight to your taste buds. This is a really exceptional restaurant. Closed on Sunday, but otherwise 6 days of terrific dishes. That's Veggie Village, 1255 East Northern, or call them at 602-944-1088.
Maryland Deli and Mini Mart on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland is much more than just a great Shell station and Mini Mart. Great cook-to-order food, different flavors of coffee and tea, beer and fine wine, including kosher wine, round out a wonderful one-stop shopping experience. A loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum, check them out on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland and Phoenix. That's Maryland Deli and Mini Mart, 602-277-6269. Cherry Blossom Noodle Cafe has terrific sushi, salads, rice and noodle dishes, soup, and even great pasta. On the northwest corner of 10th Street and Camelback, it will become your favorite Asian restaurant. A loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum for more than 10 years, it is simply the best place for a great Asian lunch or dinner. That's Cherry Blossom Noodle Cafe on the northwest corner of 10th Street and Camelback. Tell them that William Wolf sent you there. Telephone 602-248-9090. Texas Grill on the northeast corner of Bethany Home Road and 16th Street has been my favorite steakhouse for 31 years. Great food, especially their chicken fried steak, as well as daily specials in a comfortable setting, keeps me coming back for more. You just have to try it for yourself. Also a great Sunday brunch starting at 10 in the morning. That's Texas Grill on the northeast corner of Bethany Home Road and 16th Street. Give them a try and you will have a new favorite steakhouse too. My name is William J. Wolf, host of Middle East Radio Forum since 2003. As you may know, I am a personal injury attorney in practice since 1971. I was just awarded the high honor of Trial Attorney of the Year by the Arizona Trial Lawyers Association. I handle all types of personal injury and wrongful death cases. Unlike many other attorneys, especially the high-volume TV advertising attorneys, I do go to court if necessary to obtain the best possible resolution for all my clients. It is often impossible to obtain the best possible result if your lawyer does not have the reputation of being willing to go to court on all matters. If you have a claim, please call me for a free initial consultation at 602-279-1914. My office is at 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203 in Phoenix. Again, call 602-279-1914. I look forward to meeting you and making sure that you obtain the best possible recovery. Call 602-279-1914 and please continue to support Middle East Radio Forum.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on 960 The Patriot. To join in the conversation, call anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free 888-960-9696. Questions are also welcome at radioforum@aol.com. That's radioforum@aol.com. Now back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to Middle East Radio Forum, and I would like to say Happy Easter for all those who are celebrating Easter. I know a lot of you probably aren't listening now. You'll listen on the podcast because you're doing other things on Easter Sunday, but have a very wonderful, joyous Easter. Okay, Devin, let's get back to the subject. First of all, I mentioned before the Temple Mount. Please explain what is the Temple Mount?
So the Temple Mount is the site built by originally King Solomon and later expanded by King Herod, which is a platform on the top of Mount Moriah. It is the same spot where Abraham took Isaac to sacrifice, and it is the same spot where Solomon built his temple and later Herod built his. So it's where the first and second temples stood. The temples were destroyed, the first by the Babylonians and the second by the Romans, but the mount, the platform on which they were standing, still exists. Now, in the 7th century, the Muslims conquered the land of Israel from the Byzantines, who controlled it. And the Caliph Omar I should say the Christians at that time, the Byzantines, used it as a city dump. They did that on purpose because it had been a Jewish holy site. The Caliph Omar ordered that it be cleaned off, and they built a mosque there called the El Aqsa Mosque, and they also built a shrine, the Dome of the Rock. The Golden Dome, that's a very familiar symbol of Jerusalem, is not a mosque, it's a shrine. So in the Quran, it says that Muhammad had a dream in which he went to heaven from the furthest mosque. That's what it says. And they've interpreted that to mean from Jerusalem, even though there was no mosque in Jerusalem in Muhammad's time, and he never left the Arabian Peninsula. But that gave them a claim to the area, and they built their mosque on top of the Temple Mount, and they did that in many places to preempt the religion who had been there before the conquest from claiming back its holy site. And so that is what the Temple Mount is. It is the holiest site in Judaism because even though it is no longer the temple, it is still holy ground. And the presence of God is there according to Judaism. It is the third holiest site in Islam after Mecca and Medina. And it's holy to some extent in Christianity too because Jesus also went to the temple.
Well, Devin, you know, what really bothers me, Israel in 1967, after being successful with the Six-Day War, captured the whole area, and then Moshe Dayan, I believe it was him, gave the keys, in other words, gave control over the Temple Mount back to the Arabs from whom they had captured it. They had basically desecrated the Jewish site for many decades. What possible reason did Israel have for giving control over this most holy site in the Jewish religion back to these Muslims?
I guess I would have to say that they were not thinking long term, but they had just barely survived and won miraculously the 67 Six-Day War. And what they were seeking to avoid is a religious war with the whole of the Muslim world. And in hindsight, now that we see that the other Arab countries are warming up to Israel and becoming friendly to her, you might even say that there was wisdom in that. I, at the time, didn't think it was wise, but in hindsight, if it allows the Muslim world to live in peace with Israel, then maybe there was wisdom in it.
Okay, let's talk about why always is this a flashpoint for riots after the Six-Day War.
So it is a holy site in Islam, and the Palestinian movement going all the way back to Haj Amin al-Husseini used that and emphasized the Al-Aqsa Mosque and constantly claimed that the Jews are planning to destroy it and rebuild the temple or whatever they're claiming. This isn't true, but they use that because it's a sensitive issue with the Muslims and it's very easy to incite them. And again, there are large crowds who come there on Ramadan and other holidays, and they use this. So they incite, they attack the police. When the police respond, they say that the Jews are attacking the Temple Mount, and they show videos of the police hitting worshipers on the Temple Mount. Yesterday, for example, the rioters built up piles of stones in the Al-Aqsa Mosque itself. And if you look, the stones don't belong in the mosque, right? This is a mosque. And they're wearing their shoes, which you're not supposed to wear in a mosque, because they were there to riot. But they threw stones at the police from the mosque because they want the Israeli police to go in to the mosque, and then they can say the Israeli police are invading a Muslim holy site. They're trying to drag the whole Muslim world into a war, as they've done 5 times before, right? In 48, in 56, in 67, in 73. They've succeeded. They're not succeeding, but they're trying, and their touch point, their flash point, the thing where they get the most traction is always the Temple Mount.
Well, Devin, how long do you think the status quo is going to continue? I mean, I guess maybe I'm asking you to take out your crystal ball, but based upon history and what you know about the area, perhaps you can give us an educated opinion.
My only answer would be for the foreseeable future. First of all, although it was our holy site, it's been a Muslim holy site for 1,300 years. So the alternative would be to do what they're claiming we are doing, which is to destroy a Muslim holy site. And that's a dicey thing, right? Even if we had a holy site there first. Now, what a lot of Jews want to do is not destroy the mosque, but they want the right to pray on the holiest site in Judaism. And the Israeli government has been allowing more and more Jews to go up there and pray. They consider this a violation of their holy site. They don't want to share their holy site. And that's the crux of the matter.
Yes, but they throw stones and they injure and perhaps kill some of the Jews who are trying to worship there at the wall. How long can that continue?
First of all, those people are doing it are not Muslims in any real sense. The fact is they're, as I said, bringing stones and wearing their shoes in a mosque, which is forbidden. They're doing this. Islam is to them a political slogan. The 50,000 people who went on Friday to pray in the mosque are Muslims. But the 470 who piled up stones and threw them down at the Wailing Wall are not Muslims. They're simply people using Islam as a slogan. And how long it continue? One of the problems, to be honest, with Arab culture is it's very volatile and it's very violent and it's very easy to incite them. And even though most of the Israeli Arabs are very much want to be part of Israel, it's very hard for them to resist the most radical common denominator. And the terrorist organizations like Hamas know this, and they play on this.
So what's the end of it? There is no end. In other words, it's just going to continue because it's like putting a Band-Aid on the problem.
As I said, if you look at it overall, it has been getting better. The 50,000 people did not riot, which they did last year, by the way, and in previous years. Let me give you another example. There's always another flashpoint is the Damascus Gate. On Ramadan, that's a sort of open area in the very crowded East Jerusalem. And they like to come there, and vendors put out fruit stalls and stuff. And last year, Israel, to prevent a riot, they said no one can sit here. And, of course, there were riots. This year, they said, fine, go ahead. You can have your thing. And the people who were selling stuff, they've been locked up for COVID. They couldn't make any money. They were very happy about this. And then some troublemakers came and they threw rocks at police. But what the Israeli police did, instead of shutting down prayers at the mosque or shutting down Damascus Gate, they went in, grabbed the people who were throwing rocks, and arrested them. And this quieted it down. And the people who were selling or there to celebrate the holiday were very happy about it. They don't want their holiday ruined. They don't want their mosque full of rocks. They want to celebrate their holiday, which is a joyous holiday. It's not a violent holiday. And these people are subverting Islam. And the real question, to answer your question, is when will this end? It will end when they themselves suppress this radical element, when they themselves stand up to the radicals in Arab society, and only then. The Israelis can only do so much. They're going to have to stand up for their own rights and their own religion.
Devin, do you know what the sanction is for these people who are arrested? What happens to them?
What I know is this. It depends on the individual case, but I do know that of the 470 who were arrested on the Temple Mount the other day, all but 130 have already been released, and many of those will be released. The main objective of these arrests is to stop them from causing a riot, to take them out of circulation. If they investigate and find they're connected to a terrorist organization, they'll go to prison for a longer period of time. If they're simply someone throwing a rock, they don't go for very long, although I think they should. But that's what happens. They re-release them.
Okay. Devin, we have a caller, Joe from Phoenix. Joe, you're on the air. What's your question?
Yeah, hi. Just had to call with this suggestion that there was wisdom in Israel giving up the holiest site in Judaism, that somehow this was some wisdom because it will lead to peace, when we see that it's been this source of, we even see that it hasn't led to peace. It's a source of conflict and a center for such conflict and dispute for so long. I just don't understand.
Joe, I need a
why
question, though.
Mr. Spear would say this.
What is your question? Why he would say this?
Okay.
Well, the question is why is he saying this? I don't understand why he's saying this.
Okay, by the way, Joe, I'm giving away a copy of Devin's book to anybody who calls. Call my office and you can arrange to pick up the book. Go ahead, Devin.
So I understand the question. I'm not saying the Jews should give up their holy site. What I'm saying is you can't really at this point in time destroy a Muslim holy site, which it also is. And what I think is slowly happening, and the terrorist organizations are resisting, is that it's going to be a holy site for the Jews as well as the Arabs. So I think that's the solution. It's kind of de facto happening. More and more Jews go to pray there, for example, on certain Jewish holidays. And the problem is that you can't just destroy a 1,300-year-old Muslim site that is the third holiest site in Islam. This is what happened in history, and you can't really dial history back. But I do think Jews have every right to be on the Temple Mount. The Israeli government agrees with this and has said as recently as today that what the Israeli police are doing on the Temple Mount is protecting the right of freedom of worship for all religions, Jews and Muslims.
You know, it's kind of amazing, Devin. I've been to Israel many times, and I look at this and I think about what happened during the Six-Day War and also the War of Independence. The idea that that wasn't destroyed just by being there with all the shelling and shooting going on is kind of amazing.
Well, I'm sure they were careful about that.
Well, you can be careful, but, you know, when you have...
They didn't shell Jerusalem at all. I mean, we didn't shell Jerusalem. It was infantry, the paratroopers, that took the Temple Mount, and I'm sure that was on purpose.
All right, Joe, thank you very much for your question. Appreciate it very much. Devin, I've talked about your book a little bit, The Future of Israel. Can you describe what caused you to write the book and what it's about?
What caused me to write my book was I was going around speaking and defending Israel to audiences. And audiences ultimately would usually agree with me. I felt that the peace process was a big mistake, and it would lead to what it's led, which is Hamas running Gaza, the Palestinian Authority running Judea and Samaria, and much worse problems than it solved. And it was a disaster. So people would always ask me after the speech, okay, we agree with you, so where do we go from here? And I realized that deserves an answer. And the answer is not simple. I don't have a simple answer the way that, say, Land for Peace people did, where you give away land and everything is lovely. I think the answer is complex, but there is an answer. And they keep trying to square a circle with Land for Peace, and it's never going to work. So I legitimately have to offer an alternative. And I offer in this book an alternative, which is a completely different way to think about the conflict and solve it, and for what it's worth. And that's what the book is.
Okay. I thought it was very interesting. I especially like the chapter on evangelical Jews getting converts. Generally, Jews don't seek converts, but you advocate for that in your book. Can you explain that?
Well, I think the Jewish people have suffered because we felt we could keep our religion without expanding it. Muslims and Christians understood immediately that in terms of religion, it's expand or die. And the Jews felt that the world would leave us alone to practice our religion, and we didn't need to convert anyone. But it's not true. If we're going to have the right to practice our own religion, that means that we're going to have to expand it. And besides, I think that the Jews have something very attractive to offer. I think that for people who want a rational and thinking way to God, who want to approach God through reason and not through leaps of faith or fear, Judaism offers an answer, and I think there'd be a lot of people attracted to that if we would offer it.
Right. And I would like to thank especially the evangelical Christians for their support of Israel. Evangelical Christians are some of my very, very favorite people, and I very much bless them for their support to Israel and for this radio show. I know I have a lot of Christian listeners, and I want you to know I appreciate that very much. Devin Spear, thank you very much. I will absolutely have you on the show again. Again, I'd like to wish everybody a happy Easter. And next Sunday, as I mentioned before, Mayor Jolovitz returns. He's going to talk about the United States and Europe are betraying Israel. So why is Israel cooperating? An iconoclastic response or perspective. Mayor's a terrific host. I know you'll enjoy his show. So please tune in to the show next Sunday and do spread the word about Middle East Radio Forum. Available everywhere in the world on my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.com. Again, this is noon here in Arizona. It's also noon Pacific because they're on daylight time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and 10 p.m. in Israel. And again, please support the show by using the services of the advertisers, letting them know you're doing so because they advertise on this program. Direct donations, as I said before, are very welcome. Even if it's only $5, it shows me that you're interested enough in the show to write out a check, put it in an envelope, and mail it to me. I thank you for listening. Again, have a joyous Easter if that's your holiday. I look forward to being with you again soon.